Hello, PhotoPilllers! Rafael Dabar here. Welcome to another episode. Today we have the amazing Kristi Odom. Hello, Kristi. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
And today we're gonna see a lot of photos. We're gonna learn how to take these amazing wildlife images that you take, Kristi. Thanks again for being here and YouTube channel. And can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and honored, and I'm looking forward to meeting more of the PhotoPills community. And it's been so nice to see you again. Where did we meet up the first time? It was what, New York with cookies?
Yes, cookies, New York, Manhattan, Photo Plus, not bad. With Josh Creeps and a few more friends. Amazing time.
We
Can't
got
wait to
giant
go back to
cookies
New York.
and walked around Times Square together. It was awesome.
So, Kristi, what are we going to see today? But for people that don't know who Kristi Odom is, could you explain a bit your career, what you're doing for a living?
Of course. My name is Kristi Odom. I'm a wildlife photographer and filmmaker based in Longmont, Colorado. My goal and mission with photography is to connect people emotionally to wildlife. I want to use visual arts to show that animals have characters and personalities and emotions, because we share this world with so many amazing, beautiful animals, and I want people to feel like I feel when I see wildlife. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also part of the International League of Conservation Photographers, so making sure to photograph wildlife in an ethical manner is very high on my list. And yeah, do a lot of teaching and workshops, and I'm excited to be here today. That's a little bit about me.
Awesome. If you're ready, we can jump right into the presentation. And guys, if you have questions, please leave your question into the chat. We have Sandra Vallabre with us as always, and she will be collecting the question for us. And Kristi will help you with anything you need.
Sounds
Here we
good.
are.
All right, let me get my screen. Do you guys see it all nice and good there? Perfect. I just have to move
Yes.
things around so that I can hit left and right here. That's my name. That's my Instagram. Feel free to follow me. I'm friendly. Send me your work. I'm excited to show you some of mine today, but I'd love to see some of your work as well. Here's a couple of my favorite images. I've had kind of a crazy path to get into wildlife photography. It always has been my biggest passion, but I found that in order to do wildlife full time, I've definitely had some twists and turns. Like, I started doing concert photography and sports photography, and then I got into weddings. I did over 300, maybe even closer to 500 weddings. I've done so many weddings, and I've been doing full time wildlife for the last 4 or 5 years, but it was always kind of the side. And now I'm like really excited that it's my full time, doing conservation stories and things like that.
Wow.
But that's a little bit about, yeah. So these are a couple of my favorite images, just so that I can give you guys a visual introduction. My work takes me traveling a lot, which it's been interesting the last couple of years, and how things have changed and how we've all kind of had to pivot as photographers. Have you noticed that? Lots of pivoting, right?
Totally.
So it's been a lot of fun. So those are some of my favorite images, ones that really kind of make my heart sing. And I'm going to go through a couple of my a little bit about my thought process. But is that all right? We good?
Yes. I'm excited.
No worries. When I take photos of wildlife, I'm constantly asking myself 3 questions, like, what do I see? What do I feel? And what can I eliminate? But what do I see is what is the subject I'm photographing? Here it's an orangutan mother and child. What do I feel? I feel that connection. How can I put that feeling of connection in the image? And what can I eliminate? Because anything in that frame is going to be there forever. So I'm constantly looking like, do I need to get tighter and eliminate the face on the baby orangutan here? Do I need to eliminate on background distractions? And a lot of times I'm using different lens choices to get tighter, or I'm using light, or what else do I use? Different apertures in order to eliminate what I don't want to be a distraction in my image. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like one of my favorite things to photograph. I'm obsessed with bears. Okay, bears what's your favorite animal?
Well, my favorite animal, I think, is a dolphin.
Dolphin. Oh my gosh. Dolphins are pretty cool. They're pretty They can be pretty violent though. Dolphins have a little bit of a mean streak.
I'm not. I'm not.
I like dolphins as well. I like over in New Zealand. There's this amazing place where you can swim with the wild dusky dolphins, and it's one of my favorite things because they're like acrobatic and they jump around you and stuff. I love the sea lions and stuff. So yeah, dolphins are awesome. But we're gonna talk about bears for now because they're one of my favorites, and I like bears because they have so many emotions and expressions, and you can really feel that energy, and one of my favorite places to photograph is a place called Brooks Falls, which is up in Alaska. And I know that like when you go to Brooks Falls, I remember the first time I went, and this is what you see. It's like, oh my gosh, like how am I gonna take this and put this into a like two-dimensional single frame? Because there was all this like energy and chaos and movement of water. There was so much power in this scene. And I kept thinking, like, what can I do? Like, what do I see? I see the bears. What do I feel? I feel movement. I feel chaos. What can I eliminate? There's a lot going on. So I want to, in the bottom right, you see this horrible log that might take away. So I'm sitting there thinking about, how to photograph this in a way that tells what I'm experiencing. I decided to go with a slower shutter speed to show the movement in the water and the chaos. And one thing that I noticed that these bears are really still relatively to the moving environment. So I picked a shutter speed that would stop the motion of the bears that were waiting patiently for the fish, but it would show the movement of the water. This is one of the first shots that I got that I loved. That bear was so still. It was great. And it's funny because Brooks Falls is kind of a popular place to take photos, and there's a platform where you can photograph the bears in the waterfall. And sometimes the platform allows you to use tripods or monopods, and sometimes it doesn't. This was a day where it didn't allow me to use a tripod or a monopod because there were too many people on the platform. And it's funny because like I posted this and I remember like Nikon reshared it and it says that there was no tripod or monopod used, and people were like commenting because you get those comments always online that are like, that's so BS, like this is not a handheld shot, like photographers lying. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But luckily one of my friends actually took a picture of me taking a photo. So here I am.
So that's cheating.
I was using my elbows. I was using the platform itself. I did have to crop a little on the left and the right because the lens was a little wider, but I shot this with my Nikon D5, 200 to 500 lens, and 1/20th of a second seemed to be like that ideal shutter speed that captured the bear still, but had the movement of the water behind it. To me, it was my first successful shot at Brooks Falls. I love the bears. Have you seen bears?
No. And I can't wait to see them wild.
They are absolutely amazing. And here's another shot. Once again, picking that slower shutter speed to get the movement of the water and the stillness of the bear. I love silhouettes. Silhouettes are, a lot of times if there's light behind the subject and no light hitting your subject and you expose for the background. So that white water went to a center gray because the camera's always looking for a center gray, an 18% gray. And if there's no light hitting your subject, it'll drop them into shadow. And I love using silhouettes. So here's how I shot that one. It was a couple days later. I was allowed a monopod. So that helped a little bit with those slow shutter speeds. So 200 to 500 lens again, my Nikon 200, 500, the D5, 1/20th of a second. I had my Manfrotto monopod. But I think that's like the biggest thing that I constantly ask photographers when they're taking pictures. Like they'll say, what shutter speed should I use? And I'm like, well, it depends. Like, what are you trying to do? Do you want things to be still? You want movement? What are you seeing? Because everything, our aperture and our shutter speeds, and even in some ways our ISO are artistic choices to take a photograph in a way that is different, that reflects our unique viewpoint of what we're photographing.
Yeah. What made you choose this particular photograph? I mean, this silhouette of the bear. against the white water moving. What were you feeling at that moment to decide to shoot it like that?
I think sometimes when I see bears, I think of like fluffy teddy bears, and I love the like texture of the fur. And I love how the texture of the fur was, you know, in some ways kind of similar to the texture of the background. So I wanted something abstract, but it kind of looked a bit teddy bearish. And then I, of course, wanted the movement. Because if this shot, and I did take this shot with a faster shutter speed, and you see all these droplets in the background, which to me, it caused too much chaos. There wasn't a center of focus in the image, and like your eye would go to the splash and to the splash and like those droplets over there, and there was less found it to be less interesting when more things were sharp and more and the action stopped. So having the abstraction of something moving so fast it can be chaotic, like moving water, having that slow shutter speed just made it into lines, which I thought was kind of cool. So
Nice.
the same sort of thing with the slow shutter speeds and playing around and capturing movement in the shake. And then on the absolute other end of the spectrum, sometimes using those faster shutter speeds are great because you get to like capture every single drop of water that you know, might actually enhance the photo. This photo was actually at Lake Clark, and there were a lot of photographers out photographing the bears at Lake Clark. It was really a low tide, so we could walk out on the water, and we walked out on the water, and the bears were in this spot where the light was over our shoulder, and they had this golden light on them, and they were fighting and playing and having fun, and you just hear these cameras clicking, like as these bears are having so much fun. And then the bears ended up running from this side to the other side. Instead of the light being over our shoulder, the light was now behind the bears in this bright white sky. And the most interesting thing happened. It was all those shutter clicks, all of them stopped. The only clicking I could hear was my camera. Here I am with all these photographers, and everybody stopped taking photos when the bears were on the side where the light didn't favor them. But I think that's really interesting too, because when things change and situations are a little different, it's nice to think, well, what can I do? I don't want to take the same shot that all 20, 30 people here are taking. And if you were to expose for the bears and the light was behind the bears, like right here, you would get like this kind of, you know, brownish, you know, muddied color, and then the sky would be bright white. But my thought was, I'm really drawn to the shape of this fight. So I exposed for that bright white sky. And since the camera is always looking for middle gray, it's looking for that 18% gray, exposing the white as if it was a middle gray, so if it was 18%, dropped the bears into silhouette. And I chose a really high shutter speed here. And I also chose a really low aperture because I wanted separation of foreground and background. I didn't want that stark line of the horizon. I wanted it to be a little bit softer. And I didn't want all the imperfections in the water in the foreground to be a distraction as well. So I was using a really shallow depth of field. I was at 5.6. This was with my 500 Nikkor lens. And yeah, that fast shutter speed was, you know, something that I used to express what I was feeling. So
Beautiful.
A little bit about bears. I love bears. But I am really like, you know, I'm interested to, it's been an interesting journey for sure, because I used to be one of those photographers that my gear kind of set in my camera bag, and I wouldn't take it out unless I was doing a big trip. Like if I was going to Alaska or Africa or Australia, like that's when I took my camera out to take photos. And when the pandemic hit and we weren't able to travel the beginning of 2020, I think that everything changed. You know, everything changed about where to find stories, because to me, taking photos, like it's what fills me with life and purpose, and looking for stories in different places you know, I will say the last 2 years has changed me more than I could ever imagine. Have you found that as well, that the last 2 years has just kind of like changed? I think it's changed us all fundamentally, you
I
know?
think it changes all. And actually, yesterday you had organized a class with Eduardo Blanco, which is he's a wildlife photographer in Spain, and he came up with the idea of photographing the wildlife within 1 kilometer from his home. Like, and he made this photography project because he was not allowed to travel. He was not allowed to yeah. And in Spain, we had this rule of for a certain period of time that we could only go for a walk maximum 1K from from our homes. So and then he came up with the idea and the story about building this photography project about the wildlife around his home. And it's so stories sometimes come up, naturally, taking advantage of the bad situations that we live, right?
Exactly. And I have been like always looking for that individual shot. I hadn't been really exploring myself as a storyteller in a series. And when I had started a little bit of a project back in 2018, it was actually back when the Nikon Z7 came out, and the mirrorless cameras, I think, have just such a great ability to photograph macro. With focus peaking, which focus peaking is this feature that, looking through the electronic viewfinder, it throws a light on what's in focus in your frame. So you see this like colored light. Like I use blue on mine, so I see blue when things are in focus. And for me, macro was always challenging with the focus. But being able to put my lens on manual settings and then move in and out, I was able to I just started having a lot of fun with macro photography when the Nikon Z7 came out. So I started photographing insects back in 2018. And I'm glad I did that, because during the pandemic, it was like that's where I put all my energy into, was photographing dragonflies and butterflies and bugs, and doing video of those as well, like all the 120 frame per second video of insects. And it was like it's interesting because like when I was a kid, one of my favorite toys was it was like this little kit that had a magnifying glass and a little microscope. And I remember like going outside with it and then realizing like, oh my God, look at these insects. Like, oh my goodness. It was like, to me, it was a discovery tool of what's in our backyard. Look at the pattern on a leaf. And to me now, I feel like that same joy when I have a camera. I feel like it's a tool for exploration and like seeing magnificence in things and having us slow down and see things that our eye can't see. So super into bugs, right? I love my bugs. And during the pandemic, I really leaned on this insect story. And the insect story wasn't just about the insect. It was about an amazing group of an amazing group of community scientists that meets every Friday to count dragonfly and butterfly species. They've been doing this for almost 30 years now. So we're going to get into like some of these pandemic stories, because I find that they've been a lot of fun. So here's my group. And it's really interesting too, because they have, I think as photographers, like one of the things that I love is I find that passion is contagious. And us as photographers, we're able to share our passions with the world, which I think is a beautiful thing. Same thing with these insect lovers, like their passion for bugs. It was like nothing I could have ever imagined. And I found myself super obsessed with different dragonfly species and butterfly species. But what I didn't realize was that I was kind of coming, I had started following my first big story. And, I think that there's been a massive decline in the insect population. So groups like this that have been keeping record of data, that data is massively important to understand environmental change and use of pesticides and what happens with land usage. Like there's all sorts of important things that come from this. Like I remember when I was a kid driving around with my dad, like we used to have to scrape bugs off the windscreen because there were just so many insects everywhere. And now when I'm at a gas station, I look at the squeegee and I can't remember the last time I've had to do that. And it's really quite devastating that, I mean, the insects, they pollinate our plants and our flowers, and they also feed birds in the bottom of the food chain. So having this decline is catastrophic to the whole ecosystem and the biodiversity that is around us. So me going and like photographing the bugs and photographing these bug people, it started becoming my first like real story that I got passionate about, that showed something that was going on environmentally. And here I am, like I've taken all these like photos that I like of wildlife, but this was the first time I got a story published. And this was like right before, no, this was during the pandemic. And then one of the interesting things happened, which when the pandemic happened, scientists were not able to go out and count butterfly and dragonfly species. So the data became super relevant so that research could keep on going. So the data that groups like this, as well as data if you are taking photos using programs like iNaturalist to record what you're seeing in nature, like that data became really important. And for me, like one of my dreams came true, which it sounds unbelievably crazy, but like I ended up getting my first story published by National Geographic.
Wow, congratulations.
Which it was, oh my gosh, I was so excited. And it was like opening up this door and actually being able to use photos to tell stories that mattered, and to like encourage community scientists, and to like show people this amazing population of insects that, you know, had let me start marveling at wildlife that was close to home. I didn't have to get on an airplane and photograph bears. Like I could go into my backyard and take photos. And the fact that my first story was a local story, this was within 30 miles of my house, it just really showed me that we are all the best storytellers for our own local wildlife, you know, or local, you know, local stories, or, you know, I'm so passionate about those. But it was really cool too. They like paired me with a National Geographic writer. And I love like, you know, partnering with other artistic people, but some of the things that they picked up on this story was just beautiful. You don't know what's there until you know it's there. That's what repetitive surveys can do. Peel away one layer after another of nature, so you see just a bit deeper into what it's all about. And that's one of the things about going to the same local park over and over and over again. I started to see it's not just the animals, it's the plant life, it's the fungi life, it's what lives in the water streams, it's the insects. There's a whole like biodiversity really encompassed everything that was in my local park. And I was starting to just see how these ecosystems work together. And it was absolutely beautiful. Here's some of the images that they used for the article. You can see this online. Super stoked. So it's like during the pandemic, it was like one of my dreams came true, which was, I mean, that's kind of like the mecca, getting something published by Nat Geo. And it was really exciting for me.
Definitely. And congratulations. It's amazing.
Well, thank you.
You know, stories are everywhere. You just need to find them, right?
Exactly. And like the picture here of the dragonfly's back, like those are things to me where I'm just like using that camera as a microscope to see patterns and to marvel. And, you know, like it was just so much fun. I love this quote too. More people are seeing the citizen science approach and collective effort towards discovery as our best hope towards figuring out how we can live together on this planet. And I thought that was... So I ended up, I got married and moved to Colorado. When did I do that? End of 2000, so the very first year of the pandemic. And when I moved out to Colorado, I was really interested in how community scientists were, you know, counting, because there's such a power to just like going outside and keeping record of what animals are around you. And I started looking at community science groups out in Colorado, and I found a group. I found a group that goes to like 12,000 feet and above. Like they hike up these mountains to count picas. I didn't even know what pika was before I moved out here. It's this oh my god, it's the cutest thing. But this
I can
ended up
know.
being my second story I did for National Geographic. So, pikas are a rabbit relative, tiny, tiny little. It looks like a mouse. It's got like Mickey Mouse ears, and they collect flowers, and But they also in the mountains, with the fact that there's a lot more heat in the environment than there has been, like species that depend on snowpack and things like that are really they're struggling with the temperature changes. So this group of, I think it's like 437 people, are part of the pika patrol.
Wow.
They're collecting data to make sure that the pikas don't disappear from the Front Range, because they have disappeared from different places around the US. So it's this amazing group of people. The project's mission is to document and collect key information about pikas and their habitats to better understand how climate change can be threatening in the survival of certain pika populations. But I absolutely fell in love with these pikas.
Yeah,
I mean,
they are
aren't they
adorable.
cute? I'm like, oh my God, they're so precious. And I mean, how beautiful is it that we live in a world where people are willing to go to high altitude and hike just to count pikas and collect their poop and like do all this stuff for science? Like, it just kind of warms my heart, right? But it was really nice because I think during the pandemic, my work really shifted from looking for that singular image to trying to find stories that encourage people to create change and celebrate people that are doing things like counting pikas at 12,000 feet, right? And then you get to
Oh.
oh my God, just makes me pause. Sorry, bad jokes. I love bad jokes. Anyways, yeah, so that's a little bit about like some of the stuff, and it's been, I think that the pandemic in a lot of ways has helped me slow down and really evaluate what's important, and to be able to try to use photography to tell bigger stories is what's important to me. So it's been a crazy journey. I'm rambling here. How are we doing? Do we have questions? Do we have
We
comments?
have quite a few questions. If you want to answer them.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. First question, Mario Batella. What time of the day were you shooting the bears? Do you have like a favorite time of day? You shoot all day, golden
All
hour,
day.
blue hour, all day.
All day. I love photographing the bears all day. It's from when the sun comes up to the end of the day. So as long as that platform's open, or if I'm out, I do like the morning light and the evening light, but I recognize that you can't always get that. That really limits the hours that you take photos. And that's one of the things about the insects. The insects are like, they love bright light, bright sunlight, and the insects absolutely love like middle of the day. So going out on a really sunny day at like 1 o'clock is like the best time to photograph insects. And a lot of times, like, that's times when photographers aren't taking photos. So I don't know. Yeah.
All day.
All day.
Okay, next question. Naveen Wiswanath. Having the eyes sharp is critical for wildlife photography, and yet it's also a fairly small target, hard to do. How can you describe some of your techniques to ensure eye sharpness?
Yeah, so the cameras are getting better and better and better, and like I've been super shocked at like the Z9 and how the Z9 could actually track the eye of the pica. First thing, getting sharp eye images, go update the firmware in your cameras. People forget to update firmware all the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, autofocus gets better and better like every other month. So a lot of times like people will be like, it's not catching. And I'm like, update your firmware. But yeah, I like using like that. I use like kind of a wide area for my autofocus, and then I use an eye tracking, and that limits where the camera's searching, but then it also like really tracks the eye. So that's I think one of the things is just getting super familiar with your camera and what autofocus modes work for you, and also embracing the newest technology that you can. Because I do like going shallow. So sometimes this shot's shot pretty shallow, but yet the eye's still in focus, which makes me really happy.
Awesome, thank you. Then we have Trish. That what made you keep the partial bear on the left in the shot instead of just the two fighting? He refers to the three bear shot.
I'm
But yeah.
laughing because it's such a good comment, and like, oh my gosh. So I just got like a review from one of the women that runs the BBC Wildlife Photography Competition of the Year,
Mhm.
and she asked me the same question.
Really? Maybe Trish. Well, what's her name?
Oh my gosh. Well, don't ask me anything live. I
Okay,
totally
yeah,
forgot. But I'd rather not give it out to you because I don't want people to start hounding
yeah,
her.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
you are asking a very good question. And it's
Mhm.
one that I just got asked by somebody that was, sees best wildlife photography in the world. So I don't know. I might be considering doing another crop on that image and cutting out that one on the left. I kind of felt like it was leading lines in. I like the shape, but I think that you've got a good comment. You got some good people here in the chat.
Yeah, definitely.
They
Yeah,
know
no,
their
PhotoPills community is very active.
stuff. But yeah.
Awesome. Then we have Manpreet Shoki. Could you please talk a little more about your journey from part-time to full-time and what you did to move to full-time with wildlife
For the
photography?
full-time wildlife.
Yeah, that.
Oh my goodness.
Tell us.
I started doing the stories. So that
Yeah.
was like the biggest step with wildlife photography because there's so many people taking really solid portraits of animals, but to be able to tell a story is a
Mhm.
totally different. And it's really weird because, so many people were like, you shouldn't do weddings. You should just stick with wildlife. You should have stayed with that. But to be honest, the fact that I did weddings for so many years taught me how to photograph people, and
Mhm.
a lot of the wildlife stories are based on wildlife human interaction and conflict, and so being able to photograph people has been something that's helped me tell stories. So there's been, the biggest shift I think will happen if you move away from taking singular images of wildlife and move towards taking stories,
Mhm.
or if you get really passionate about print sales, which I'm not the best at marketing and doing. I just bought a printer though, and I'm starting to do my own print sales from home. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be a new chapter.
Nice.
But yeah.
Nice.
So
Thank you. Lewis, favorite macro lens or close-up filters?
oh my god, I love my 105. This is my Nikkor 105. It's my lens for my Z, so it's like the S series, but I'm
Mhm.
obsessed with the 105. This is my favorite. And I had the 105 for the F mount back when I was shooting with an F mount camera. Now I'm completely mirrorless. But this is my go-to macro lens for sure.
Nice, nice, nice. Rolf Rees, are these photos cropped? Are you that close to the Picas?
Sometimes they're cropped a little bit. I also love shooting. I have a 45.7 megapixel camera, like with my Z7 II and my Z9, and with that I do shoot on DX mode a lot. So I'll shoot with like my 500 millimeter, which is my go-to long lens, the 500 5.6. But
Mhm.
shooting on DX mode will get me a closer shot, and it just brings that file down to a 20 megapixel file. And a lot of people ask me like, why don't you do that in post? I actually don't like cropping too much in post. I only like cropping like a little bit off, which is why I'm surprised that people in the industry have been advising me to crop more. Like things like that bear on the left side. I was really kind of surprised to get that from somebody in the industry. But yeah, so I'm starting to kind of maybe open my eyes to being able to crop a little bit more, but I want to make sure that the images are going to hold if they print. So, make sure that you've got, a lot of detail there. But yeah, shooting with a 500 millimeter lens on DX mode, you'll get quite tight shots. And the
Awesome.
Pecas actually like, they sometimes are really curious and they sometimes get a little closer, you know.
Mhm.
But you definitely want to keep a healthy distance from wildlife. And sometimes, like, even though I was keeping my healthy distance, the pica would like disappear and then come up right next to my shoe, and I'm like, no, give me some more distance than that. But I spent a lot of time with the picas for that story. A lot of time. They got really,
all over the place.
Yeah, they're like
Oh.
they're curious. They're curious little I don't know, bundles of joy. I love them.
Okay, two more questions and we move forward. Max Dobbins, Raphael is always talking about planning your photos. How much planning did you do when shooting the bears?
A lot of planning. A lot of planning. One of my favorite things to do is I actually follow hashtags on Instagram before I go out. So I'll hashtag like follow Brooks Falls Bears or something like that. And it gives me a lot of information about what time of day, what they're doing, how many bears during different weeks. So there's all sorts of ways that I kind of do a lot of research. I also really big at hiring local guides that work in local conservation to help me when I'm doing big shoots. So, you know, I just got back from Yellowstone and we hired the most amazing guide and he'd worked in the park for like decades and with wolf conservation, and he knew exactly where all the animals were. So it was like, I'm really big on, you know, hiring the right people, hiring wildlife biologists and conservationists, and like using that to like help me understand the movement and patterns of the wildlife I'm photographing.
Definitely.
I don't have a good memory, so I have to like rely on other people. Oh.
Okay, the last one from Surfract1. What are some tips you have to get published for the first time? So that's a very good question.
Great question. I'm actually really obsessed with portfolio reviews. Because photography, there's a huge percentage of photography that's about networking. And there's some amazing reviews out there. And that's how I started getting introduced to the people that were the different editors at National Geographic, because I signed up for portfolio reviews with them. The New York Times has an amazing portfolio review. Palm Springs Photo Festival has an amazing portfolio review. So finding a way that, and like now they're all virtual, which is amazing. WPOW, if you're in Washington, D.C., like the Women's Photojournalist of Washington have an amazing portfolio review. So being able to like get a collection of images together and show them to an editor, and then, you know, I mean, it took me years of portfolio reviews to kind of like, you know, oh, my first one, I was like crying. It's like, you look like a girl wandering in the woods looking for something to say. That was one of my comments. I was like, wow. But you know, there was so much honesty and validity in that, because I was just kind of like going on these trips and looking for what there was to photograph. I wasn't photographing for stories. So the portfolio reviews, not only will they help you connect, but they'll give you thicker skin after a while. And where we met, there's Palm Springs does a portfolio review at Photo Plus sometimes, and so you can go early and do the portfolio review. So there's keep an eye out for those. Keep on a list for those. So that's my biggest recommendation. Meet people. And you know, it's so funny because like some people give the advice of like, you know, don't reach out until you're ready. I like knock on doors like crazy all the time. I start my week with like throwing out a few impossibles. And I'm like, and then when one of them comes back and it like goes through, I'm like, oh my gosh. But I am the queen of rejection. I get rejected all the time because I'm constantly reaching for things that I think are out of my reach. And then sometimes it's like, actually, yeah, we would like to publish you. And I'm like, sweet. But I mean, I think I had like 10 years of rejection letters from Nat Geo before I finally got something in there. But
congratulations.
So yeah, just don't be discouraged. Like keep on knocking. That's the biggest thing, is like keep on knocking.
Never give up. Never give up. It's true. It's true.
Oh my goodness. Oh, okay, so I got some more photos. I kind of kept this short because I wanted to keep some conversation going, but I think that like it's really beautiful too, because just the things that we discover around, and there really is beauty everywhere. You don't have to go to these far off places. But I would like to share with you guys what I'm doing this year, because I've had an insane year. Like it's been a great year. It's been crazy. But I started off the year at Yellowstone National Park, which was a lot of fun. Like it was really nice because last October last October, I was given the honor of being one of the first people to play with the Nikon Z9. I was given the launch campaign. A few photographers were given the launch campaign. So that was like one of the biggest shoots of my life. I was so nervous. But once I got my hands on one, I've been out photographing as much as possible. So the Yellowstone shoot was a lot of fun. That whole thing was broadcasted too. It's becoming a 5-part series that's going to air this Thursday on B&H, and you'll hear everything from my creative process from start to finish. So I'm kind of excited about this B&H series.
Nice.
But it's funny too, because like for me, a lot of my stories have just been me going out and trying to, find the story and photographing for the story. But it's been interesting because with the Z9 campaign and the B&H campaign, it's like you have these hours to be photographing wildlife. So the pre-planning in those situations has been like insane, because when you have a limited amount of time and you have to get wildlife, and it's been so yeah, that question about pre-planning was great, because like literally they had somebody fly over with the cameras. I wasn't able to touch them really before my shoot, and then it was like, all right, your shoot's starting today, like let's see what you get. So it was that's where hiring like wildlife biologists in the area and things like that, in Yellowstone, having a local guide that just knew so much about wildlife has been just instrumental to my work. And I was really excited though, because we got so much wildlife on the Nikon shoot. They gave me 5 days that we only really needed the first 4. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like we had maps of exactly where the animals usually hang out, and like it was unbelievably beautiful. I was so nervous though. I was like, because I've always wanted a camera campaign and I had never gotten one, and I was like, and then to get the call for the flagship, I was, and it was pretty exciting. So that's what I was up to in January, and then I literally just got back on Friday from being in Bolivia and Ecuador, and really excited to photograph the hummingbirds. And this is a shot taken with the Z9. I had the FTZ2 adapter and my favorite Nikkor 500 5.6 f-mount lens on the camera, and it was I shot this on DX mode. I did crop a little bit from the top and the bottom, but the sides were not cropped. It's just I moved it to a 4x5 orientation instead of the original. But even on that DX mode, and even with a crop sensor, just like super surprised. Like it's just been such a beautiful journey to see where cameras have gone and what you can photograph nowadays. Playing around with the hummingbird in flight and the higher ISOs, like 4,000, and then playing at 8,000 ISO because I wanted that wing to be as sharp as possible, which I think 3,200 might have been a little slow for a hummingbird wing, but I'm really quite amazed there's no grain removal software or anything like that. I just toned this to black. I just moved it to black and white, pulled the saturation out, but really excited with technology and where it's going. And it's really interesting too, because like when I was in Bolivia, I was working at an animal sanctuary, because one of the things that really got me feeling the emotions of animals was working at this sanctuary years and years ago. I took some photos over a decade ago, and the sanctuary houses animals that have been caught up in the illegal wildlife trade. So animals that have been taken out of the wild, a lot of times by, killing the mothers of the animals and taking the babies and taking them into trafficking. And in Bolivia, you weren't allowed to reintroduce animals back into the wild until recently. They've just allowing it again, which is great, but it's really hard to do. So this one sanctuary has over 900 animals that they take care of. It's really interesting too, because it's like the sanctuary, it's like the people are caged, like you walk through cages to walk everywhere because the monkeys are running around free. But they have all sorts of wildlife that, I started to really feel that these animals that have been taken out of the wild, like you could feel their trauma and you could feel what they had been going through. And that's where I started really understanding the depth of the emotional intelligence of wildlife. But these are some new shots. Like literally, like I said, I got back on Friday. Pumas end up in trafficking way too much. But here's a little monkey, and you can just see the sadness, and you can see the stress. And you know, a lot of times when the monkeys are taken from the mothers in the wild, they, you know, kill the mothers and they pull the babies off the dead mothers' bodies, and you'll see broken fingers and things like that because they've held on to their mom so tightly that they had to break the hands. It's one of the most, you know, wildlife trafficking is just one of the most horrific things you will ever hear of. And it's just, it's devastating. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, is show that we're dealing with emotional animals, so people don't buy, you know, medicines that are made out of animal parts, or they don't try to take these animals for pets or anything like that, because there is such a, you know, love of mother and child, and there is so much like just peacefulness in their eyes. This monkey here is Maruka. Maruka has been at the sanctuary. She was at the sanctuary before, and she's at the sanctuary again. And Maruka is like really, really old, kind of runs the place. It's the funniest thing, but you can see her age in her face, and she's just one of the most beautiful souls. But me being obsessed with bears, one of the projects I'm working on currently is about Andean bears that have been caught up in trafficking. And I don't understand why anyone would ever think they could have a bear as a pet. But also people use the bear parts for medicine and things like that. So this was a bear that was in trafficking, they were trying to kill the bear to use the part for, you know, and sell the parts for medicine. And they were struggling killing the bear. And then in the middle of all that, the authorities were called, and this bear was rescued with like a complete bloody face and everything, and brought to the sanctuary. But I would like to read something that the owner of Lucinda Verde, which is the name of the sanctuary I was working at, what he said in response, and to tell you the story of this amazing animal. This bear's named Ayehu, and these are Marcelo's words. Ayehu, he was traumatized, he was blinded, he was crying, he was devastated. Ayehu, sorry, Ayehu was a blind bear that was beaten by the people in the community. They were trying to kill that innocent, defenseless animal, and in the process, they threw rocks on his face and hit him with sticks and everything. They took both eyes. That is not only heartbreaking, but it is a crime. When he came to Lucinda Verde, he was dying. He didn't want to live. He stopped eating for almost 30 days. His face was destroyed, no eyes. His nose was broken, same with the jaw. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want to live. We stood with him for 24 hours for several weeks, and we were almost about to tell him goodbye, but we did one last thing, one last day. I prepared a special formula, and we told him, you don't have to drink this formula. He didn't want to, and we don't want to pressure him, but he drank about a full liter of formula. We waited for a couple minutes. If he had thrown the formula, it would have been him saying, Vicky, Marcella, that's it. Please let me go. But then he accepted the formula. 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes passed. He didn't throw it up. It was like he was starting to know that he had something in his stomach. I think a light came on. I think he wanted to live.
Wow.
So it's like, sorry. I think that as photographers, we have such a power to tell stories that these animals can't tell themselves. And we have such a power to be able to like connect people emotionally so that people can respect and treat wildlife properly. And doing this trip and doing trips like this is what fills me with purpose and fills me with that fire to use my camera to see what I can do to create change, you know? Sorry, I'm really close to this story. I was literally hanging out with this bear just like a couple of weeks ago, so I'm a little bit like a little attached. Like, have you noticed though that photographers have a lot of empathy and they get pretty emotional sometimes?
Well, this is the way you are, and the way you can you know convey all those emotions through your photography. It's this image of this bear is just so deep, and you can see the drama there.
So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing the story.
Well, thank you guys for listening, and I apologize for being a little choked up. Like I think that there's such a, you know, as artists, we have the power to show beauty and make change, and it just fills me with purpose and drive. And it's just the journey over the last couple of years. And, you know, it's just been, yeah. So that's why I do what I do.
It's an awesome journey.
Do we have any questions or concerns or comments or?
We have a few. I have a question from Angela. Angel Sepulveda. When you were starting out, any tips to focus on fast targets like eagles if you have a simple camera and long telephoto lens?
Yeah, so birds, it's crazy because insects and birds are two of the more challenging because you have to have such specialty equipment. With macro, you really need those specific macro lenses, and with birds, you need the longer telephoto lenses. So it's a little challenging, but being able to, like, if you've got a camera that's higher megapixel, being able to move into the DX mode will help out a lot. But yeah, I think you need some specialized long lenses a lot of times. But there are some like great cameras. There's a little what's that Nikon P100, P1000, something, blanking on the name. But there's some great cameras that have like mega zooms that actually work really, really, and that's got a built-in lens that I think is like, I don't know the specs on it, but it can help with bird photography. Like it's nice that technology keeps on improving to help photographers not need as much gear. Did that answer that?
Yeah. Let me see if we have any other question. It seems that we don't have. I think people is right, a bit shocked, about the story and the bear. And yeah, it's really impressive.
Oh, there it is, the P1000. Somebody put the specs up in the chat. Perfect. As equivalent to a 3000 millimeter lens. That's the one. That camera is amazing.
But can you photograph wildlife with not that expensive gear? Like, is it compulsory? Or
well, that P1000, I think, is a pretty inexpensive camera that has like tons of ability to, So I mean, yeah, the gear does make a difference. That's why people do invest. But at the same time, there's options now, especially if you're looking for web-size images and things for social media and less for print. Look up all that stuff. I think that's great. I think that, check it out. And check out, like, the biggest thing I will say to anyone is support your local camera stores and go in there with all of your questions with lenses and cameras and, hey, I want to do bird photography and I'm on a budget. And the local stores are amazing with their depth of research, and not just not just Nikon, but all the different camera brands. And so anyone that starts asking me like very specific camera questions, I really refer them to their local camera stores. Support the local guys.
Good tip. We have a very good question from Mario Batella. Can you tell us a bit more about your approach to proportions and composition?
My approach to composition? Oh my gosh, I could do a whole course on that. I could. And like somebody else is asking about the B&H series. We actually do a whole class on composition, and we do a whole class on approach. So if you go to B&H and look for that series, I think it'll go into some more detail there, but it's really hard to answer that as a Q&A because I'm all about like eye movement and using shapes and all sorts of like how you cut the frame. And like I said, there's like a whole, it's a great question. It's such a great question though, that there's like way too much to answer in like a short period of time. But I'm constantly asking myself, like, how is my eye moving before I hit the shutter? Like, is my eye going from, where are the distractions and how can I eliminate those? And how do I spiral people into what's important? Like the bear's eyes here, how do I use composition to highlight what I want people to see?
Yeah. So please go and watch the B&H series. And where is it? What's the website?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll just have it somewhere on the website. Or their YouTube channel. I'm sure I'll have it as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So check B&H, guys. It's an amazing platform to learn a lot of photography, and I've been teaching there. too.
If
So
you are like interested too, like I do a lot of classes that are very specific. Like I've got one on how to bring more emotion into your wildlife images, and I've got a class on macro. I do, here's my mailing list. It's on my website. You just go to
cool.
kristiodom.com. Which will bounce you to Kristi Odom Fine Art, or you can just go to Kristi Odom Fine Art, and you go to the very bottom, and there's this place where you can join the mailing list, and I'll talk about like upcoming classes and share that with people, as well as workshops, because we do workshops to photograph bears and all sorts of animals all around. And hopefully
Nice.
with PhotoPills, we can do something joint one day, because I think that would be amazing. Wildlife.
We should do something. We should actually we will do something.
I think that would be great. But I'd love for you guys to I only send out like 6 emails a year. I'm not very aggressive with people that sign up for my mailing list. I want to make sure I don't bug anyone. But also my Instagram, just Kristi Odom. I would love to see you guys work too. So if you connect with me on any of those, just send your images. Because you guys have just listened to me for like an hour talking about all my images. I'd love to see yours.
Well, guys, take advantage of it. Of this offer by Kristi. Send her your images, and also if you're interested in joining Kristi in one of her workshops, which are amazing, just go to her website, subscribe to the newsletter, and you also have the workshop listed, right? Awesome. Well, we're almost about to say goodbye. We have one last question. If you have like 1 minute to answer, from Scott Ashley. What do you think are the advantages of using a mirrorless over a DSLR camera?
That's a great question, because at first, oh my gosh, when I got my first mirrorless, when they put the Z7 in my hands, I'm going, I don't like this. I did not like it at all, because I've been shooting as a professional photographer for so many years on either a film camera or a DSLR, and I'm just like, what is this? Because the electronic viewfinder, at first I was like, I don't want to look at a screen, was kind of what I was thinking. But when I was a film shooter and I moved to digital, there was that whole movement of being able to hit play and seeing what you had photographed, to see like if you got the shot, which as a photographer being out in the field, that was really important. So even though I didn't want to move from film to digital, I did, and I was glad that I did. But then when mirrorless came along, it's like it took that guesswork out even more. Like before I hit the shutter, when looking through the viewfinder, I can see what's in focus. I can see the light. I can see how dark the frame is. I can see so much detail. I can even like put my camera in monochromatic. I can use the focus peaking. I can do video and like see exactly what's going to be captured. So I'm now 100% mirrorless because of the instant gratification of knowing what my image is going to look like before I hit the shutter. And I think that like, yeah, I'm a big fan. But I was very, very grumpy about change and switching over. I remember just being like, it was funny because I like handed the camera back to my buddy at Nikon. I was like, I don't like this. And they were like, just give it some time. And I did. And now I'm like, oh, I can see what my photos, I see where this is going. And I didn't really start doing video. Part of a lot of what I do is video now. I didn't really start doing video until I was mirrorless. And like it did take my macro to a different level. So there's so many advantages. And now the Z9 is just like nuts. That was a fun campaign.
Awesome. Kristi, thank you so much for spending 1 hour with us and show. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's just been amazing. I know that you just got home. Now you have another event in 1 minute. So thank you so much for being here live with us. And any final words before we say goodbye?
Just go out there and show us what you're passionate about through the visual arts. Like a camera is such a beautiful tool to show people our hearts and show people what we love, and keep taking photos. They're important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And let's do something. Let's do a workshop together.
In 100%. And I hope you guys will join us when we do this, because it's going to be epic.
I hope so too.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Well, if you like this video, this class, give us a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next Wednesday in another video. And remember that you have the power to imagine, plan, and shoot legendary photos. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you all.